Hi. The fic goes hard. The fic goes so hard for no reason. And look at my shoe. Hot topic, my beloved. Today I have returned with another video essay because as we leave phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe behind and transition into phase 5, I feel like I can now say with more certainty that I don't like it. Now, I'm aware that there's already quite a few videos and threads that share this same sentiment, and a lot of them are like, I don't like this movie, or this movie, or this movie, or this movie. And I'm like, well, I didn't like that one, or that one, or that one, or that one either. But I feel like there's more to be said than just that. They're just a little bit in their flop era. Today, I want to look into why exactly that is. Spoiler alert, the short answer is overabundance. As always, you do not have to agree with the opinions I express in this video. Obviously. These are just my observations and findings. Into the interdimensional voiceover void I go. I lost feeling in my left butt cheek. God damn it. I just realized I didn't have my mic plugged in for my intro. I'm so predictable, it's amazing, actually. Welcome in. There's always been this general notion that viewers should keep up with the universe's additions as they're released, only now it's exploded into a terrifying vomit wheel of projects. I'd like to quickly apologize for scripting in Vomit Wheel. Where phase 1 of the MCU consisted of 6 films across 4 years, the 2-year-long phase 4 instead consists of 9 films and 9 television shows. And if I told you I'd never even heard of Werewolf by Night until a week ago?
Good luck. I'll be rotting for you.
So not only are you supposed to keep up with about triple the amount of content, but the content you're consuming is also significantly lesser in quality, which makes it feel even more strenuous to get through. Unless you're continuously putting out stellar projects, your audience might not stick around for all new 18 releases. I only caught up on everything so that I could make a more informed video rather than talking out of my ass, which I love to do also. And having watched every project, I've decided to simplify phase 4 into this tier ranking chart. Feast your eyes, throw your tomatoes, leave a hateful comment, whatever you feel like doing with this information. Alright, now let's get into the why of it all. Why I think this content is significantly lesser in quality can be answered in a few ways. Starting with arguably the most ridiculed part of the newer films online, let's talk about the visual effects. No! If you want to understand why this is an aspect of the franchise that is on the backslide, then I simply suggest that you watch these 2 clips. One from Iron Man 2009 and the other from Thor Love and Thunder 2022. And some of you might be saying, well, you know, the CGI isn't all that bad now, like this scene in Eternals or this one in Black Panther. And sure, yeah, but when I can whip out these bad boys, one after the other, 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 that's not such a good thing. So why are we on the backslide? Well, what we have to remember is that it all connects right back to the main problem, which is overabundance. The worsening time constraints being put on Marvel's editors for more stuff more often only adds fuel to the existing fire, and the people behind these projects are exhausted.
Everyone is getting magically disappearing suits. Sure, then comes the argument that it's to allow actors to emote in scenes, but that's also kind of insulting, because acting doesn't only require the face.
Is that a knife? Is that a real knife?
Yes, it's a real knife.
My weakness, it's small knives.
In a 2022 leak from a former Disney VFX employee, it was disclosed that artists share accounts of unworkable deadlines and immense pressure leading to stress and unsatisfactory final product. Many have requested to never be put on a Marvel project again, saying that the studio has the worst VFX management out there. Now, for context on just how much is demanded of them, as an example, we can look at Infinity War. Out of the more than 2,700 shots in the film, only 80 didn't feature any visual effects. That means less than 3% of the 2.5-hour-long movie was created without the aid of visual effects. So you can imagine what high demands and low working conditions might look like. No, wait, actually, you don't have to imagine it. Here. Also worth mentioning is the news of Marvel's ex-president of VFX, Victoria Alonso. The recently fired president of VFX has come under fire for her treatment of VFX workers and reportedly would give work out to the team she liked, but if you had pissed her off in any way, then you're gonna get frozen out. With that being said, I do think it's a bit of a jump to call her singularly responsible for an issue that's clearly bigger than her, and I don't know, maybe it also has to do with the industry-wide mistreatment of VFX workers.
Studios said their strategy for the writer's strike is to break the WGA. What does that mean exactly? Studio executive literally said the end game is to allow things to drag on until union members start losing their apartments and losing their houses.
Also, these many new projects saw many new directors, and I think some of them had a very explicit and intentional vision for their films.
You want to talk to me? Talk to me. What now? What now? What now is you give me the body and you piss off.
Whereas others did not. But you know, at the end of it all, at least Taika Waititi is there to mock the overworked and underpaid editors, right?
Does that look real?
In that particular shot, no, actually. It doesn't really, right?
Let's get into the meat of it. The actual story content of these new projects, and more importantly, how they work with each other, is where I find this phase falls the most short. A lot of these projects in this newest phase tell stories that are very central to particular themes of hardship. And my problem with these stories are not these messages they're trying to get out, which I know is an issue for certain crowds.
It's not really the brown girls from Jersey City who save the world.
And when I say certain crowds, I mean the same people who soiled their pants when the women-led Ghostbusters was announced. I'm an adult virgin. And those are all good conversations to be had in this universe. That's not my issue at all. I just think a lot of the stories lacked substance, and the way they shared these messages was oftentimes kind of boring, or lazy, or slow. Here that I'll make a point to say that I don't think superhero fatigue is the issue for Marvel, since that is an opinion I've heard from a lot of people. One of the producers of the fucking fantastic Across the Spider-Verse has this to say about Marvel and the superhero fatigue phenomenon. I don't believe it's superhero fatigue. I believe it's a movie that feels like a movie I've seen a dozen times before fatigue. If you're using the same story structure and the same style and the same tone and same vibe as movies and shows that have come before, it doesn't matter what genre it is. It's going to be boring to people. And the audience in the theater cannot be sustained on Easter eggs and reveals, or even these big, crazy multiverse stakes. They only really care about, like, the relationship between Rocket Raccoon and Groot. And he's so right. I do only care about the relationship between Rocket Raccoon and Groot.
I will kill for you, Megan Thee Stallion. Solid back.
I think the problem with newer editions like Thor, Love and Thunder, Eternals, and Black Widow is that they sort of just shoot themselves in the foot. Their premises certainly didn't lack potential, but then instead of delivering anything that feels inspiring, inventive, or genuine, they instead very formulaically point out this life lesson that's inserted into the midst of constantly world-ending stakes with reliance on the same recycled archetypes, poorly written one-liners, and then just sort of a whole lot of nothing in between their self-contained narratives.
Eat my hammer!
Like, I don't know. A lot of these stories are just missing their old sparkle. You either get it or you don't. Thor. By trying so hard to live up to its predecessor, Love and Thunder becomes almost a mockery of itself.
A little special invention just for the film, which I have it on quite good knowledge that it's going to make it into real life.
The film is like in a constant battle with itself because of the ongoing tone clash. It's trying to hone in on these serious topics while simultaneously relying on overdone and forced humor. It's trying to make this the most emotionally developed Thor while also reducing him to his childishness. It's presenting this mortifyingly powerful god-killing villain and then letting his character go to waste.
All gods will die.
Eternals. A ragtag team of immortals conveniently jams itself into the MCU post-Thanos.
Hello. Hey, who's your gardener?
You know, for a movie with far too many converging storylines and far too many new characters, I don't know how Eternals still manages to be so boring. You haven't earned emotion from me. You've just thrown all this new information in my face and then told me to care. The forgettable award goes to you, Eternals. I love the sounds of the city. Black Widow. A forced and underwhelming storyline, a preemptively guaranteed ending, and more conveniently inserted character context that should have been introduced much farther back. Farther. This film was written in 11 days. I feel like I don't need to say much more than that. 11 days. 11 days. 11 days. Black Widow, you received no awards. Your $380 million was more than enough. Conversely, a film like Guardians of the Galaxy 3 manages to draw on grief, love, and letting go, but all while balancing the plot and dialogue to further these conversations in a way that makes me actually care, both about the narrative lessons and the larger story and future stakes it presents for Marvel's world and its characters.
Lila, and Teefs, and Flora, and me. Rocket.
Shang-Chi, too, does a really good job of sticking to the superhero genre while still creating a story that's freshly original and honest.
You changed your name from Shang to Sean?
Yeah, I don't...
I wonder how your father found you.
I was 15 years old.
As another example, Spider-Man No Way Home was massively critical to not just Peter Parker's arc, but also Peter Parker's arc, these guys, and the entire conversation of the multiverse and its effects as they'll play out down the road in Phase 5. And it does all of this while imparting these deeply emotional messages in a way that actually feels genuine.
We're okay. It's just me and you.
In regard to overarching narrative, a lot of these projects just feel very disconnected from one another. I mean, What If has quite literally next to no importance in regards to furthering other stories in the timeline, but it's fun, I guess. The same can be said of Black Widow, I Am Groot, and Werewolf by Night. Meanwhile, projects like Eternals, Ms. Marvel, Multiverse of Madness, and Hawkeye introduce some new faces and then don't do a whole lot besides that. Like, okay, a legal comedy about a second Hulk. Sure, whatever. But building to what? Substantive in what way?
Hello, Jennifer.
Kevin?
So she goes to Marvel Studios and confronts robot Kevin Feige. Or, okay, a Christmas comedy about Clint Barton overcoming his Endgame-induced trauma. Neat. Or a young fan of the Avengers gets to become one. Haven't heard of that before. Every project in Phase 1 serves a definite purpose in building up to this one ultimate thing, which is, of course, the Avengers. Whereas Phase 4, with 18 projects and feeling far more disconnected, builds up to... what? Exactly? Since they have 3 times the number of initial projects, they can take 3 times the length to further the overarching phase's narrative. And they do. Only it's not because it needs that much exposition, but just because they can. The why of this entire problem and the overabundance of content is actually quite simple. It's why Disney added in Spider-Man's new gold detailing at the last minute, just so that they could then release these. And of course, you know, you have these. More characters, more merchandising, more money. With that being said, even some of the stories that significantly relate to expanding on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, such as Quantumania, Loki, and Multiverse of Madness, still fall short. Now featuring world-ending stakes as opposed to its previous shenanigans, Quantumania to me was, in one word, clunky. Ant-Man 3 just lacked character development for Scott while forcing it for Darren. Darren? Are you serious? When I tell you the gasp that I gusped when this motherfucker appeared on my screen. Partly because it's Darren, and partly because what is that? The Wasp is barely relevant. Cassie isn't really likable to me, given that her whole personality is just this.
I know how to take care of myself, okay? Trust me, I'm pretty good at it by now.
And the story itself was flogged by a bunch of new and tiringly goofy characters.
I didn't know he could do that.
More poorly forced attempts at comedy, and a villain that's unbelievable.
My name is Darren, and I am not a dick!
And now there's this, too. Loki started off pretty strong to me. It just felt like it ended up dragging itself over a completely underwhelming finish line.
I don't know. On its own, it's really just 30 minutes of sitting here and listening to this guy talk.
After getting distracted with subplots that it would have done much better without.
It quickly becomes apparent that Loki is not a show about Loki. It's about the TVA.
And again, what was an excellent premise has just a lackluster execution. I feel like they knew they wanted the TVA, and they knew they wanted King, and they knew they wanted this weird incestuous relationship, and then they just made everything else up. Similarly, WandaVision's 9 episodes set the foundation of Wanda's trauma and devolution into villainy, which are eradicated within the span of one film a few projects down the line. This film was one of the biggest letdowns of the phase for me personally. Like with Thor, Ant-Man, and Eternals, it did both a whole lot too much and a whole lot of cameos, quips, chasing, and nothing simultaneously.
Kick that witch's ass.
Like, this subplot was this song for what?
I could do this all day.
2 seconds later.
And if Wanda's arc felt forced or rushed to you, that's because it was. The original director of Doctor Strange was fired and replaced by Sam Raimi, and what was supposed to be a phase-long arc for Wanda instead got reduced to just one film of emotional whiplash and plot inconsistencies.
All this for a child you met yesterday.
This incredibly complex character got reduced to just being a deranged, crazy mother, and what could have been a super interesting villainy arc for her was instead just her running around trying to kill a kid for a whole movie. Let's look at my ranking one more time. I don't actually think a lot of these projects are bad per se. I just think that when you take a step back and look at them all as a collective, you'd think, it's disorganized and oversaturated at times, but more than anything, it feels inconsistent. I want to close this up by saying that just because I didn't love this phase doesn't mean that I take the position of many others online and saying that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is doomed. Let's pipe down. Let's all calm down.
Let's all calm down, yeah? Let's all just chill the F out and talk for a second.
I think there are clearly a number of issues within the studio right now that need to be worked on, but I also believe that there's still time to turn this spaceship around. I forgot I wrote that. Sort of like phase 1 of Marvel, this universe did have to go back to the drawing board in order to establish these foundations for future stories. That's an argument I've seen in defense of Marvel's new content, and to that I'd say, okay, sure, that's right. But I also think it's safe to say that they did a pretty shite job this time around. However, there's still room for a lot of growth. Or, alternatively, total collapse. Only time will tell. Well, that's it for me, but I thought I might chip in my current perspective as a young, progressive, female, longtime fan of the MCU. And I think it's important to remember that the underlying ultimate evil here was money. More stuff, more money. And who cares about how that stuff works cohesively with other stuff? Or the people who get tossed under the bus making that stuff?